Welcome back to more SCL North American action. I'm Anatoly, joined by Taco. We just saw Strictly Business 2-0 Soar Gaming having to kind of adjust to new roster changes as Soar Gaming without their Hunter Zaxi, now making the transition to Obey Alliance.
And that's going to be an interesting matchup to see, and we'll be getting a good glimpse at it in this next set coming up. So since we're going to be watching Obey Alliance versus Elevate.
Obey Alliance versus Elevate should be an interesting one. This is going to be the Week 1 rematch from last week, and considering Zaxi is new to this team here, how do you fare him with the 4 members of the World Defending Champions Obey?
He might be new to the team, but he's not new to the players in the slightest. These are all members that he's been very familiar with among the console scene already, so his adaptation to the team should actually be the perfect fit to make up for their previous Hunter leaving.
And Elevate have quite a bit of a journey ahead of them, because Obey is quite a formidable team. Unfortunately, they don't have the same success as they did in Season 3 after they won that Worlds. The Spring Split and the Summer Split going the way of Astral Authority, just doing a lot of work, but it's time for them to kind of rebound and make a statement for themselves.
Well, Dr. L is really the last standing member of this former Elevate roster, and now with all of these switch-ups, it's evident that this team still has a lot of potential, especially coming out of relegations in the way that they were able to perform there.
Well, let's head into picks and bans for game number 1 and see how both of these two teams have prepared for their first match of the SCL Fall Split. Very important for them because this is the path to HRX.
And it should be an important matchup indeed. And I just realized, I don't believe that Elevate was a partaker in those relegations.
Oh, no, they weren't.
No,
so this is
I just got so used to it coming off of the summer relegations, just remembering that all these teams have definitely gotten a way to come in this SCL.
Having to make a lot of adjustments. Hell is the first ban for Elevate with the Raven. It's a great selection because knowing Dwarst in that solo lane for Obey Alliance really loves this warrior pick.
And not to mention that these are just favorable picks in general, considering how much pressure they can provide in the early laning phase. And Hell in general, she's so flexible. Nobody wants to deal with her in any position.
Elevate locking the Chronos very early on. We're not going to be sure if that's for Mr. Teep in the mid lane or for Griffin quite yet in that Hunter role. It's a nice flex pick, but 2 frontliners here for Obey Alliance very early on, a Xing Chen and a Sun Wukong.
Interesting that they would be so confident in picking the Xing Chen that early as well, because I would imagine that that's actually headed towards the support role as opposed to the solo lane, although it could potentially be a Sun Wukong in the jungle.
You never really know with Obey Alliance between PB and Jelly, Mifflin, and Dwarst. All their gods just kind of intertwine together. It makes it very difficult to pinpoint their strategy, but their front line has so much control. They locked in Sobek for their 3rd melee character.
Knowing that they won't have to worry about any shred of protections initially, considering that it's a Susano for Elevate. Nemesis not being a choice here for Elevate, meaning that Obey can actually run a little bit more rampant with these frontliners.
Banning away 2 more warriors is Obey Alliance, taking away the Kukulin, taking away the Erlang, Shen, Hebo, and Soul, targeting out against Delta Marine.
And I think that it's a better matchup for Obey if they're going to have to select anything, and getting the Thoth is really just one of those things where you can't necessarily ban out Delta Marine.
It's very difficult, especially when you have so much protection in front of him between these 3 gods that Obey selected earlier on. But now, Elevate are trying to kind of synergize with that Sylvanas by adding a Zeus on top of it, having a lot of AoE control in some of these jungle fights.
A ton of AoE control actually for Elevate, especially with that Chalk. Having the Giant, Silence, and Mini Knockup should pair nicely alongside of the Sylvanas and Zeus ultimates, plus Susano's always there to take part.
It's going to be a lot of AoE damage on the side of Elevate with those gods. Xingwei is going to wrap things up for Obey Alliance. Zaxi is going to be playing that Hunter role now, so it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to transition with his new dual lane partner, PB and Jelly.
Well, considering that Jelly is running that Sobek, this is actually a pretty solid wombo combo that they've got going already. Between the Sobek plug and the Jingwei knockup, it actually can pack quite a punch even early on.
The knockup is good, and then we're going to probably see a lot of aggression here because of the way Jelly normally plays. Back when he used to lane with Air Cougar, he would always be looking for a lot of these rotation plays, trying to kind of let Air Cougar farm 1v1 and then just kind of sit around Delta Marine's lane for the most part. But I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of switch things up, because the way they were playing the spring split and the summer split, it wasn't as successful as Season 3.
They might not have been as successful, but they are definitely still a team that has a lot of synergy already in the works, and I'm really liking their pairing choice here. Putting Mifflin on that Sun Wukong helps mitigate some of that early lane pressure that could be applied by Elevate between the Zeus and the Susano.
Having a lot of damage with his abilities, this Master's Will and the Tiger Stun. Mifflin is going to have to retreat a little bit because of the lane clear from Dr. L and Mr. T. The Zeus Susano combination at level 1, you gotta respect it. Once Zeus drops the shield, those in-hands off of the shield just hit all 6 minions.
And more than aware that their speed buff has been invaded, they're already making the rotation to meet up with Dwurst, who's actually started up with Jelly on the enemy team speed buff.
Taking away the speed buff here, but recognizing this is Elevate, so they get their own speed buff anyway for Dr. L. And whenever you're going to get invaded, you might as well counter invade, and that's exactly what Elevate are doing brilliantly here. We're seeing in the solo lane, however, Jacob Task is playing instead of Neximus, and that's going to be a very interesting kind of switch for Elevate. As solo lane, you could plug and play, not too worried, especially a Chalk without blue buff doesn't need it because of his passive.
He might not need the blue buff, but he still would like to have the buff experience. Missing out on that just means that Obey Alliance are probably going to try to make another rotation initially to invade those buffs just in case Elevate are looking to do the same on Obey's jungle.
And the fact that we already seen Dwurst dictate the early laning phase with the Hog, with the Bumba's Mask, he really wants to try to get potentially both of these blue buffs. However, Jacob is just going to have to kind of peel back and let the action come to him.
And the same story could be said here in the jungle. Dr. L having a little bit more favor as far as XP is concerned, just applying that pressure steadily onto Delta Marine. Not looking to let this Thoth free farm in the slightest.
A lot of damage taking the jet stream. He finds the Storm God for the first blood. Dr. L picking Delta Marine off in the mid lane.
It might have cost him his life though, as Mifflin's trying to find the return kill, and it is good. Actually looking to make that trade with Teep, but
Jelly's here. He might be looking for the pluck, but luckily enough for Mr. Teep, the minions were just there, kind of second guessing himself. Jelly now wanting to commit, afraid that he would accidentally pluck a minion and then get stuck under the tower.
That's an awkward place to be in anytime you grab the creep instead of the player, and better off that he doesn't look for that trade. But Griffin trading out just fine with Zaxi, who's in the 1v2 against Elevate's duo.
This is kind of the playstyle that Zaxi has. He always feels very confident about taking the 1v1 trades, but not normal to see him take this 1v2, especially considering Visions was there playing the Sylvanas, so any sort of poke that Zaxi does is going to get it by the heel. Nice stun onto Dr. L, but pulling the triggers, Mr. T with that ultimate. Chain lightning is good as well. Gets the 3 stacks, not enough damage to kill Mifflin. Even pops the shell after the fact, just for good measure.
That was an excellent stun by Mifflin. If he doesn't make that stun, Dr. L is securing the kill onto his mid laner every single time. Delta Marine had no chance of survival outside of Mifflin making the play.
Just a slight millisecond too late there to find the damage. Jelly has made the rotation in the dual lane. He doesn't really want to get committed on too hard, however, plucking himself into the safety of his own tier 1 tower. And with these buffs respawning, there's 4 members standing strong from Elevate around these parts.
It's just one of the benefits of having that Sylvanas presence in the dual lane. So much pressure and so much lane clear makes it all too easy for Griffin to secure that buff, but Zaxi looking to return fire onto Griffin for invading that far in the jungle.
No fear whatsoever, not even using the purification beads, not using the rewind either. Great escape and safety provided for Griffin as he walks away like a bandit with that red buff. Jelly is going to try to get off some damage onto Dr. L, not really on the mark though.
As much as Obey wanted to play up in that situation, their draft just doesn't really permit them to do so. Right now, it's about them looking for the farm where they can get it. And for Mifflin, although he has a lot of early game pressure, and in fact, he's trying to apply it right now, poking his head on over to Dr. L speed buff, and instead just getting pulled in.
No problem at all for Mifflin. He already got a speed buff, wanted to get the timer on the speed buff from Elevate more than anything else. Maybe look for a sneaky, cheeky steal, you know, the cudgel, providing a good amount of distance and damage as long as you're maxing out that ability. And there's always that internal struggle as a Sun Wukong player. It's like, what do you normally max out? Is it going to be the cudgel for the extra minion damage, but it's going to cost more mana than the Master's Will?
He's trying to match right now with Dr. L, and Dr. L on the Susano has a ton of mobility already. while Zaxi
Nice steal.
steals away those oracles.
Beautiful
from
steal. Mifflin, though, is not going to give this up quite yet. Mr. Teep is going to have to ulti on top of himself. Great triple knockup from Visions. It's going to secure Mifflin before he gets even in the cloud.
And that triple detonate as well from Mr. Teep just completely destroyed any hopes that Mifflin might have had of making it into the air in time.
And that's just a great selection of the Zeus, truly abusing the Sun Wukong before he gets those defenses. Dr. L from a distance. Does he have the Bluestone Penitix? He does not, but he's going to be wrapping around the corner. Delta Marine, he doesn't know about this.
Delta Marine doesn't really have a whole lot of mana, but fortunately enough for him, Dr. L did not want to take the direct approach of diving the tower, so he'll be able to get away. And I believe that Delta Marine actually had a health pot ticking, otherwise he would have died.
Great discipline from Dr. L, not committing to teleporting to that jet streak. He wanted to try to find it during the dash or before the dash. Wasn't on the mark, but either way, by bullying out Delta Marine so hard there, he's created this little disparity between his mid laner, allowing Mr. Teep to get this one level lead.
Yeah, that was quite a delayed back for Delta Marine, and he doesn't have an Aegis available. He's got the Purification Beads in a sense to try and avoid some of that CC coming out from Elevate. There's a few slows for Elevate's favor, and that could be a tricky situation for a Thoth, but Dr. L would probably like to force an active there. Speaking
more about the Thoth here, is what he's rushing. It's going to be that Book of Thoth, and that's very important to kind of delay that even further. The power spike in the mid lane, however, Visions is going to be off the mark with a knockup, allowing Jelly to go into lurking in the water, but all those stacks doesn't matter though, because Mr. Teep gets blown up by Delta Marine and Jelly.
But Jelly might not be out just yet. Another shell is going to be coming through, but Dr. L has already made the transition to picking up that kill.
Dwurst is thinking about coming on the right-hand side. He's a little low, so he doesn't want to pull the trigger quite yet. A lot of ultimates were used from both sides, but a great little small victory for the Obey Alliance squad, as they did trade out Jelly for Mr. T, but trading out your support for a mid laner, take that trade every day.
Every single day. Delta Marine probably would have liked to have had the last hit on that with his final judgment, but just not enough damage this early on. Doesn't have that Book of Thoth completed quite yet. However, always great anytime your support is able to find the kill.
Well, Jelly has definitely a lot of base damage with his lurking in the water, with or without any of those damage items, which makes Sobek such a great versatile pick and allows you to flex it, honestly, between solo or that Guardian role.
We've been seeing a lot more Sobek lately, not just for the console side, but in PC as well. And Jelly, for the longest time, has just been constantly lamenting about how wonderful of a support Sobek actually is, and people are really starting to see that now.
And considering how Obey really like to play their front line between Jelly and Mifflin, sometimes playing support, sometimes playing the jungle, they have such a combined strong god pool that it's very difficult to really tell who is going to be playing what god. We saw in the first three picks, what was it, Xing Chen, the Sun Wukong, and the Sobek. Between Dwurst and Jelly, you don't even know who's going where.
Although you typically anticipate a Xing Chen to be going into the hands of Dwurst, it's one of his standard comfort picks. He loves selecting the Xing Chen for that solo lane, despite what a lot of people have to say about the god.
It's just so much control in team fights. The pancake flip, as FDL likes to call it, knocking you up, rooting you in place, but Dr. L might be getting rooted in place. He's not going to find the pluck. Jelly off the mark yet again, but I like the fact that he's always looking for these little playmaking opportunities, especially with three members by his side.
Pretty difficult to catch the Susano in that dash, but if he is able to connect with one of these plugs, Elevate Dr. L is going to have an incredibly difficult time trying to get away.
Trying to finish off that Hydra's Lament for the jungle. Elevate having a decent amount of damage, and it looks like already Jacob is not too far behind here. He's still on the mark in terms of experience. He's actually going to hit level 11 before Dwurst, and so despite not necessarily getting that experience of the blue buff earlier on and not having the same amount of clear in the jungle between the Bummas and Hog of Dwurst, he is actually ahead.
The slower pacing is working out a little bit better, though, probably for Obey, because this is a composition that's relying almost entirely upon Delta Marine and Zaxi getting really into that hyper carry zone. So as long as those two are able to build up enough farm to where they're just one-shotting, two-shotting every single god, then Obey Alliance are in a solid spot. I mean, Mifflin's even building into what might be a Spirit Robe or even a Hide of the Urchin second item.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's Hide of the Urchin. There's about to be some serious team fighting around this Gold Fury as we approach the 10-minute mark. Another pluck off the mark there slightly, but Dr. L is going to find the pull onto Jelly, doing a decent amount of damage with that Typhoon, and great play from Griffin, not letting the Croc into safety.
Catching him with that time rift as soon as he's coming up out of the ult. Even though Jelly had the CC immunity, he didn't have the escape necessary, and now because of that their buffs are going to be invaded.
Vision's looking for the root, not on the mark. His ultimate is available, however. In a little bit of trouble is Dr. L, forced to beat, so wait, great double knockup, peeling for his jungle. Mifflin going to go into the cloud there, going to survive that detonate. Mr. Teep though walking into safety, and Delta Marine can't really find the long distance shot, so even though Obey get their own red buff there, they take a little bit too much damage. They're going to have to concede some positioning.
Obey are falling back to their own jungle camp. Still going to lose their purple buff, though. Sad story for Zaxi. Nobody left from his team to try and help him out. And Jacob Task has actually made the rotation over to this mid lane side as well, trying to see if Elevate wanted to put a little bit more pressure on the map.
And with Jacob here in these team fights at level 12, he doesn't have a second relic quite yet, hasn't had the timing to back. I think he wants to finish off either that Genji's Guard or Shogun's Kusari, but his impact will be felt a little bit more because of that shell versus the Hog out of doors.
But Dwarves could have a little bit more objective secure based off of that Hog early on, so Elevate can't necessarily just immediately jump onto the Gold Fury, keeping in mind that Dwarves might just snag it away from them.
It's very possible. Jelly not wanting to really try to take advantage of Griffin that doesn't really have too much mana left as they start their own purple buff. Right-hand side, just a pillow fight, honestly, between two solo laners. Not going to be doing too much damage considering both of these gods have sustain.
And that's kind of just the classic story between these two hunters. But speaking of sustain, I'm actually curious to see how Elevate is planning on utilizing Visions as the game progresses. He's already chosen to build into a healer item, so with that in mind, I can imagine that Elevate want to just try and delay the team fights.
I wouldn't be surprised if Elevate actually start grouping up though, because Jacob did hit level 12. He backed for the Genji's Guard. Having Thorns to follow suit means that this is a pretty powerful power spike to be able to engage these team fights around the Gold Fury, the Lotus Crown coming out of Visions, giving his teammates that 20 physical and magical protection for about 5 seconds, but that's going to continue to tick with that heal over time.
I actually really like the Thorn selection by Jacob Task because when you're a Chalk, you're not necessarily going to be providing too much to your team later on in the game, aside from being that meat shield that tanks up everything. And if you're attacking a Chalk, you're more than happy to keep trying to run him down, as Griffin is actually trying to get run down by Mifflin.
Really important beads used there before the knockup. Jelly is going to intercept that jet stream. It's not going to hit Zaxi there from a distance, but still not on the mark with the plug. Either way, though, not too much loss there on the side of Obey. They poke out Griffin, they force out his bead, and they're kind of making it a little tricky for this Chronos to stack up that Warlock Sash.
Jelly's going to need to be careful here with these so big plucks. He's been very eager as far as trying to start the fight, but he's not going to be able to end it or have a very good chance of getting out of it without that dash being up.
Well, it's not a bad idea to try to look for these dashes on a Chronos that is going for a more resilient build. Normally you'll see potentially a Winged Blade because you're kind of fearful of staying in laning phase too long to try to get those 100 stacks.
It's not... Warlock Sash is fine as far as a slower pace game is concerned. And speaking of which,
no
though,
slow pace here. Going to find a pull onto Mifflin, doing a lot of damage, but Delta Marine returning as much as Mifflin took. But Jelly on the left-hand side took a little bit for his troubles. Elevate are getting the slight edge in these engagements, at least in the initiations coming out of Dr. L.
The problem is Mifflin has to back there. Jelly doesn't have any way to heal other than relying on his team buying him time to back off, and Jelly actually concerned that Dr. L would have been pursuing the aggression there, backs off entirely.
Worst blinking in, finds two with the pull. Furious Roar is good. Sprint popped by Visions, not wanting to engage quite yet. Dr. L forced into the Aegis after he got stunned by Delta Marine. Dwarf still thinking about coming in from the backhand side. Mifflin finding the stun onto Jacob, peeling for his mid lane, and the Zeus ultimate going to connect onto Jelly. Back in with the pull. Visions, though, in a lot of trouble, forced to use that heals. Jelly's going to be the first victim of this fight.
And Visions right now just trying to stay alive as long as possible. Mifflin looking to chase him down, but Dr. L pulling him in instead, keeping his support alive, but not long enough. Mifflin will fall for that chase.
He goes in and he gets it with the airstrike, finding Dr. L not on the mark with a second in here to kill off an additional member, and with Jacob right around his back. I don't really see Zaxi getting out of this one. The knockup is not good enough this time. At the end of the day, it's a 2-for-2 thus far. Jacob could look for more cleanup, but honestly, there's a lot of farm in mid lane to get.
Jacob is still pretty much full health, almost full mana, and there is absolutely nobody to contest him right now. Just too tanky to deal with on top of his healing sustain.
I gotta look back at before this engagement there. Sobek, Jelly using that ultimate before anything really happened. Dwarf's ultimate was so good to set things up for Obey Alliance, but Delta Marine didn't really pull the trigger there. I feel he pulled the trigger a little bit too quick without his teammates being prepared for it.
If anything, Obey Alliance actually came out a little bit lucky there, since Mr. Teep's ultimate was only able to really connect with Jelly due to the pullback from Visions.
Oh, Jelly, though, now he's lurking in the water, though, trying to find the Gold Fury. Elevate will secure this one time around, not wanting to chase down Elevate, however, with all those cooldowns not available. Jacob using that ultimate for the CC immunity. I think he was afraid of getting plucked there potentially. Great chain lightning, but it's not really going to connect on too many targets with a minion wave right there.
With 4 members of Obey Alliance in the mid lane, however, they could potentially be looking for that T1 tower, but maybe not enough damage onto objectives just yet for them to feel comfortable in trying to group up and siege.
Still only about 16.5 minutes into the game, and with that first Gold Fury Elevate getting a 2,500 gold lead, still building these Warlock Sash stacks, sitting at about 41 for Griffin, and with a level 15 Chronos, he's going to be able to be kind of a nuisance, I would say, for Obey.
That was one of the downsides for that past team fight for Zaxi. As a Jingwei, you have a lot of opportunities actually to try and come out on top due to the crit passive that you have built into your kit with her second ability. However, Chronos can get away with it.
Mid lane, a little bit of damage. Delta Marine gonna Aegis a lot of that, but pulled back in. Visions doing such a great job with these Sylvanas pulls.
And that was an excellent attempt by Delta Marine, trying to launch up as much damage as possible. Unfortunately, it's going to cost him his ult and his life.
Normally, Obey Alliance have a lot of frontliners around their mid laner, but this time around, it just seems to me as Delta Marine is left dry and high in a lot of situations that he probably shouldn't be.
It feels a little bit disjointed right now between Obey Alliance as Elevate secures the Portal Demon. Dwarf's not able to get there in time.
He's going to find 2 with the ultimate, forcing the beats out of Dr. L. Jelly's not going to give this up quite yet, plucking Visions into the Fire Giant. The knockup is going to find the Sylvanas as well into the clouds. It's Mifflin, but not before Griffin takes out one as well. It's a 1-for-1 trade.
And already Obey Alliance just trying to put the beat down onto Elevate, but no one else really left to try and deal enough damage to take out any other members.
At the end of the day, it's a 1-for-1 with Portal Demon going the way of Elevate. They've been slowly and surely securing themselves these objectives between the gold, between the Portal Demon. They haven't gotten any tier 1 towers quite yet. They haven't really grouped up because they haven't gotten that multi-man advantage. They only got 1-for-1s in most of these engages, not that 2-for-0 that you're really looking to extend the lead.
Mr. Teep is doing an incredible amount of damage already, though, between the Pen Boots and the Bancrofts, and now that he's building into that third item, Hide of the Urchin, he's looking to just make himself a tanky factor in these team fights.
Zeus already does a lot of damage with just base damage alone with his in-hands. As long as you can constantly hit somebody that already has those 3 stacks of your detonate, it's going to be pretty difficult for Obey to stick on the Zeus, especially with more health, more physical and magical protection.
And even still, Visions as well is there to provide Mr. Teep with heals should his health actually start getting a little bit lower, and that's just one of the nicer aspects of Sylvanas, having that slight bit of sustain.
And then you can't forget that Lotus Crown that's going to augment even more protections. Blink, ulti, catching Delta Marine, a lot of damage for that mid laner, nowhere to go. A great play from Elevate, no hesitation out of Visions, and then the follow-up help after that ultimate.
There's just been non-stop pressure onto Delta Marine. He has not had an opportunity in this game so far to try and safely farm out his mid lane, and that's exactly what you need to do.
And you were talking about it earlier on. If Elevate are to win this game, they need to focus out either Delta Marine, Zaxi, or both, and thus far they got one piece of the puzzle. Zaxi's getting aggressive on the left side behind that tier 1 tower. Dwarus finding one, gonna force out the beads of Mr. T to see Mifflin into the clouds. The tier 1 tower gets aggressive on Jacob, trying to find Jelly, zoning out 4 members, but he might have bit off a little more than he could chew.
And Jacob will fall down, that pluck from Jelly, ensuring that he gets pulled into a place he does not want to be. But the T1 tower still goes down, so that's technically still in favor of Elevate.
All right, Taco, tell me this. Level 17 chalk for a tier 1 tower at the 20-minute mark. Worth or not?
Probably not worth for Elevate, just because Jacob has a decent bounty being so farmed, but at the same time, it's still technically in their favor because now Obey Alliance don't have that T1 tower to fall back to should a fight ensue around the Gold Fury Pit or even the next Portal Demon spawn.
It's a 5-on-4 for another 15 seconds. Jacob was dead for about 35 to 40 of that, and it seems that just Obey are not abusing this at all. This tier 1 tower from Elevate is sitting on its last leg.
It's sitting on its last leg, but it's still a situation that Obey Alliance don't want to overextend into. Sure, they could return the T1 tower response, but that with the Gold Fury being so close to spawning, if Obey Alliance are caught out, then that just means another free Gold Fury for Elevate.
Very disciplined as the world defending champions. Obey Alliance playing by the inches, not pulling the trigger quite yet. Their sentry warding quite around the Fire Giant side, but now Mifflin is going to pull a little sneaky move there, securing that tier 1 mid tower, even boxing out Dr. L, just out damaging the Susanoo.
Mifflin is just dealing an absurd amount of damage with that Sun Wukong, but that's kind of what you expect. He does have 4 stacks in his Urchin as well, which should help him a little bit as far as taking up Mr. Teep's abilities are concerned.
Brawler's beat stick having a decent amount of penetration, but Mifflin caught in a 1v2, pulled back in. Visions is so disgustingly good with these pulls.
The pulls, and on top of that, the follow-up. Mr. Teep and Griffin were in the right place at the right time. That was like being handed a free treat. It's
not an easy task to hit Sylvanas pulls, and then you put a controller in that hand. It's even harder. More action from Elevators. The Gold Fury has respawned 5-on-4 for 30 seconds as Mifflin is waiting to respawn. Jacob going to zone out 3 for the moment. Jelly trying to get in position to do anything that he can, but the damage from Elevate has begun. Dwarves finding 2 with the pull. It's going to reset the Gold Fury, though.
But only temporarily, and it's actually going to be Obey Alliance stealing that one away from Elevate as the chase ensues. Delta Marine trying to get away from Jacob Tass, but all the members of Obey have already dissipated, only Mifflin being dead still.
Elevate, you could tell how mad they were. They popped the sprint instantly. All right, we lost the Gold Fury. Let's get some kills after the fact, but they couldn't find anything. Obey Alliance walk away like a bandit.
It's a huge victory for Obey. They were actually hurting quite a bit. It's not so much the gold disparity as much as it is the experience league that was starting to get a little bit out of control. Securing that gold just gives a little bit more global XP to everybody on the team.
This 2,000 gold lead or so coming out of Elevate is just almost insignificant at the 23-minute mark. As long as they don't give up this next Portal Demon, I feel Obey are still in a good spot. I'm
really just keeping an eye on these 2 hunters now from both of the teams. Griffin on that Chronos and Zaxi on the Jingwei. Zaxi's been a little bit more quiet this game, reading at 1-1-1, but the difference between these 2 teams is that Griffin's had more opportunities to rotate over freely in comparison to Zaxi.
And he's also been left to free farm for the most part. Griffin already finishing off the Warlock Sash stack, sitting at 100, having a lot of health to really play with to kind of put himself in a baiting position to use that rewind and then get back into the team fight. Unfortunately for Obey Alliance, they kind of allowed this Chronos to get to this late game almost unchecked.
And this is the scary part about a Chronos that hits the late game with the fully stacked Warlocks is it's up to pretty much Zaxi and Delta Marine entirely to try and take the Chronos out of the fight, which is why Zaxi is also opting for this crit build, just because it's so effective against these mage ADCs. You need to burst them all at once, especially a Chronos who has a rewind.
Not to mention, Dr. L is probably going to look for the backline penetration, and if you look at his build, he doesn't really have those defenses that you really need. Mr. T with a really nice pluck. I'm sorry, we're seeing the Sobek pluck Mr. T back in there. Delta Marine charging up that ultimate. Final Judgment on the mark. Finally, Delta Marine on the board.
Delta Marine just had to sit and wait and charge the entire time. Even though Mr. Teef had the advantage there sitting underneath the Zeus ultimate, not much else he could do considering the situation. Now Jelly actually trying to plug Jacob Task out and away from his carries, but Delta Marine still getting pulled back in by Dr. L.
He's left alone. The Typhoon ripping through, but it's Griffin that gets credited with the last hit. Jacob is not done yet. Finding two with his ultimate. Mifflin finding the slow. Jacob and Griffin going to get rooted into place by Dwurst, trying to avenge their fallen brethren as Delta Marine is still going to revive for another 30 seconds. Dr. L looking for an unexpected victim on the left-hand side, but it's actually Jacob taking a lot of damage for his trouble. He's forced to retreat. Mifflin doesn't want to give this up.
They don't want to go two-hand though because Griffin is still up and ready to fight. Instead, Griffin's going to put the rewind off into 3 members of Obey.
Great tail flip though from Jelly's going to prevent the DPS as Zaxi takes out his opposing Hunter. Mifflin landing onto Jacob. Furious Roar connecting onto the Chalk. The double knockup is good, but the rest of his teammates aren't really there to follow up.
All of these members of Obey, though, just way too tanky for anybody else from Elevate to try and pursue.
Jelly, what are you doing? You plugged into 3 members. What a madman. So much damage. His vision knocks up all of Obey. Second member falling. Dwurst trying to do whatever he can. He's going to take a spill as well. What was Jelly thinking?
Sometimes you gotta go in. Zaxi following up with Jelly, not letting his teammates die.
That's
and
2.
Bane getting a double kill onto Visions and Jacob Task.
Cleaning up the mistakes of Jelly. Great positioning from Zaxi. And with Delta Marine reviving, Obey can now breathe easy that they're not going to lose the Portal Demon or the Fire Giant.
I get the mentality there from Jelly where they wanted to just catch Elevate from around the corner, hoping that they might not have had a ward there. And by the looks of it, it doesn't appear as though Elevate had any idea Jelly was there. It's just, that's one of the worst feelings in the world, is trying to engage as a Sobek and going in between 3 people.
Sometimes they just split like the Red Sea. You see the blood in your eyes, and then unfortunate set of circumstances for Jelly. Luckily for Obey Alliance, Zaxi was at the right place at the right time. He went from 1-1-1 to 4-1-1 in the last 2 minutes, and these team fights are looking a little bit shaky here for both teams.
These are the kill bounties that Zaxi needs to be securing, however. It does seem as though he might be building into a Deathbringer as his second crit item, looking to get that super power spike off of the crit, and especially since it works so well with his kit already and is excellent at securing the kills against Elevate, best way to go.
We were just talking about his crit build earlier and how he was going to try to focus out potentially Griffin before the rewind can get off, and then maybe also trying to outbox Dr. L if he ever tries to dive that backline, making the Susanoo's life a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. Gold Fury has respawn on the left. Fire Giant and Portal Demon, though, need to always have vision for both teams on the right.
But either way, both of these teams more than happy to just have a slight lull in the action after what seemed like about a 3-4 minute team fight, just because of how long it kept going between both sides.
15-10, read the kills, heading into the 28-minute mark as Obey Alliance are starting to go Fury. Visions does spot it out here, blinking before the stun even occurring, lurking in the water, will secure it for Obey Alliance as Visions uses his ultimate. Typhoon ripping through, forcing Mifflin's ult, forcing Delta's bees, but Jelly is caught in a really awkward position. He's forced to sprint away. Great knockup positioning from Zaxi, not allowing Elevate to chase.
Happily enough for Jelly, he'll be able to go back to base, and that Gold Fury, again, wonderful execution by Obey Alliance, recognizing that nobody from Elevate was really able to respond or in the close enough vicinity to get there in time.
This is the difference between these two teams when I look at Elevate and Obey Alliance. Sure, Elevate were winning the early game with more mechanical skill, I would say, and more better decision-making, rather, their rotations, but it's all about the objective control, and you can never count out the true veteranship from Obey Alliance. They've won the last year's Worlds. They know the calls that they can and can't get away with.
Well, another reasoning, too, for as to why we saw so much early game control from Elevate is their draft is heavily favored towards the earlier stages of the match. You've got a Chalk, a Susano, and a Zeus, and Sylvanas. The only member of this team that really represents the late game super well is Griffin.
Seems that way. Portal Demon gets taken by Obey Alliance this time around. None members from Elevate even close to the vicinity. Sentry Ward even on top of the Fire Giant, as Obey Alliance are still kind of positioning themselves around this objective. I think they really want to go for a pick and go for this last objective.
They need to look for the picks. Their draft prospers off of finding the all-in burst kill, and they have that possibility between their CC setup in the Sylvanas ultimate, the Chrono stuns, even the Susano pull-in.
Look at the left-hand side, though. Mifflin was pushing that down by himself. I think he really wants to try to either bait out Dr. L, trying to 1v1 him, or force anybody, honestly, from Elevate because of the mobility that Mifflin has on the Sun Wukong. He has his 72 transformations going into that Eagle form, but not only that, he has Masamune to give him that 10% movement speed.
And there it goes, the hog advantage between the worst, securing that speed buff for himself. He'll just clean up his bounty.
Why not? Having a Xing Chen already with Blink as if that wasn't more scary enough. Put a speed buff on top of that. Try to run away from that monster.
Plus, it lets them invade the blue buff now from Elevate, and Jelly now having that 10% CDR reduction as well as just extra mana to his kit. That is one thing that Sobex will always love, is more mana.
Elevate are just allowing themselves to get bullied on their own side of the jungle, as Obey Alliance still with great vision control around this Fire Giant. There's really not too much except this Fire Giant. This Portal Demon and Golfear are still down for another 2.5 minutes or so. Left side, there's a lot of farm to be had, and that's exactly where Dr. L is going. He's sitting at level 19. He wants to max out that ultimate.
And it appears as though he's also looking to build into what could possibly be a Nemean Lion, hoping to try and deter some of that in-hand damage from Zachsy, considering that Zachsy has opted for a crit-heavy build.
That's exactly the mindset here of Elevate, because we're seeing Chalk, Jacob Task here, the hide of Nemean Lion for himself, the thorns like you were talking about, trying to really eliminate a lot of the DPS out of Zachsy.
And Zachsy is going to be dealing quite a bit of damage now, finally finishing off that triple crit build with the Wind Demon in tow. That just means his attack speed's getting an additional boost as well anytime that he crits.
Is there any point in time that you would sell anything? I'll actually hold that thought, as there's a lot of poke onto Jelly, sitting at about 75% health or so, but Dr. L on the left, sitting less than half, as already Mifflin doing Mifflin things. He's proxying between tier 1 and tier 2 on the left-hand side. He gets the wave, and now he's thinking about rotating underneath. This is a great flank.
Delta Marine was kind of getting abused the entire match, but now it's Mifflin looking to turn the tables as he approaches the back line. Griffin missing that stun onto Mifflin, so instead, Obey just trying to see what they can get away with as far as pressuring Elevate's jungle.
Mifflin just casually walks behind all of Elevate, throws out 2 abilities, doesn't even use his 72 transformations as he runs away, but this time Vicious is going to knock up Mifflin, preventing the Tiger Stun from connecting, as he's going to try to heal up. Dwarf's blinking in. He's going to catch out only one, the Sylvanas specifically, but it's the 2 frontliners taking a lot of damage thus far. Zachsy is in the back line. He gets taken out by Dr. L. This time around, he can't get the damage off.
And unfortunately, the shell is going to save Jacob Task from getting cleaned up by Delta Marine. And now 3 members of Obey Alliance just a little bit too low to want to keep this fight going. Dr. L going to be farming out that mid lane, pushing up to the T2 tower line. And Griffin, I mean, Chronos is our best at taking objectives, and that's exactly what he had in mind, and it appears as though the Fire Giant might be the next mark for Elevate.
Dr. L, after finding the kill onto Zachsy, he was full health. Nobody touched him, and not only that, the hide of Nemean Lion encourages this kind of a dive. The fact that Mifflin tried to engage so heavily onto Griffin, but got instantly denied by Visions, just goes to show the mentality coming out of the Sylvanas, not allowing his backline squishies to get focused out here, as the Fire Giant was flirted with for the time being of Elevate. They're really trying to abuse this 5-on-4, trying to not allow Zachsy back into this engage.
Well, so far, all they managed to acquire out of it was Dr. L's Purification Beads, which is still a pretty nice pickup, and it works out in Elevate's, or in Obey's favor, because Zachsy's back up, and he's going to be able to fly to the fight no problem due to that passive from Jingwei.
Jacob getting knocked up, but no continued damage there. Fearful of the chain lining off of that one shield from Mr. T, but the longer these engages go, Taco, I'm really fearful for Obey Alliance, simply because Visions has that constant heal over time.
But even with Elevate having the 4v5 advantage, they still didn't feel confident in pressuring the Fire Giant, going to show the respect.
Look at mid already. Or Dr. L is saying, Mifflin, whatever you could do, I could do better. Trying to get off that tier 2, forcing 2 members from Obey Alliance to chase down the Susanoo, thinking about invading the red, but recognize that Mifflin was right there. Fire Giant sitting at about half health already as Jacob is zoning out 3 members. He's trying to put Dwurst into combat to prevent that blink already. Visions' ultimate is going to get negated by that CC immune ultimate from Jelly. Teep is going to use his bees against Dwurst as Mifflin is thinking about diving the back line. He's going to get pulled back in. He's forced to go into the clouds. There are no Zoo stacks on him, however.
And that's probably going to work out in Obey's favor for the moment, as Mifflin trying to re-engage again onto Dr. L just to force out his ultimate.
Already a clean disengage out of Obey Alliance, but yet again, Elevate with more sustain are allowing themselves to continue this action. They're going to get the Portal Demon, but not until Delta Marine takes out Dr. L.
And it might be Visions who falls next, and sure enough, Delta Marine again with the double kill, but Griffin's not done just yet either, cleaning up Zaxi.
Great performance by that killed, at least answering a 1 for 2 as Jacob is forced to retreat. Griffin's gonna get plugged back in. The rewind though is so good. Warlock Sash, baby.
That 10%, but just not enough quite yet. Jacob Tass trying to get away now from the entirety of Obey Alliance, throwing out the truck hacks, but it won't be enough. Doris catches up to him, finishes him off with the root.
Delta Marine was so quiet this game, getting abused in the earlier stages with the constant rotations and pulls from Visions, and now he will not be denied. Sitting at level 20, he has almost a full build. Teep gonna get plugged back in. Did not have the purification beads available, but he's trying to buy a little bit of time as Jelly goes in the lurking in the water. Mifflin though gets responded to in kind. Finally, Teep falls. Going in is Delta Marine with a nice stun to 2 for 1 on that tier 2 tower.
Both of those mages had just already expended their ults, and poor Mifflin just got a little bit too close to Jelly, who was committing onto Mr. Teep.
Just so unfortunate. Trying to juggle the tower aggro was not in the favor for Mifflin. He's going to have to wait about 42 seconds to respawn. But anyway, once that happens, it's still going to be a 4-on-3 advantage for Obey Alliance. If they really wanted to, they could even go for the Fire Giant. Zaxi's going to start it up himself.
And Zaxi already aware that Dr. L is trying to approach him on this Fire Giant. Dwurst and Jelly trying to deter the Susanoo from getting any closer to their Hunter, but Zaxi's ready to actually just go in. Dwurst is already using his ultimate, and Dr. L has got nowhere left to run.
He has to use the Typhoon defensively, knocking up 2, using the Purification Beads, not wanting to get plucked or pulled back in, but instead the Pancake Flip, it doesn't matter because the Jet Stream and the Stormcloud provide such a great gap closer and a disengage to be able to get into safety.
That's a really lucky cop-out for Dr. L, that Susanoo mobility coming into play, getting him away from the Jing Wei. Those crits from Zaxi, the second that they start to connect, it's absolutely shredding whoever he goes on.
And not only that, he's going to amplify his own movement speed with the Wind Demon, slow whoever he's critting with the Poison Star. A lot of synergy with the triple crit build coming out of Hunters recently, really abusing a lot of the frontliners in these late game fights.
And you asked me earlier, is there anything from this triple crit build that I would personally probably look to trade out later on? And the only item I could imagine being targeted here would be Poison Star. If anything, maybe sell it for a Malice or even a Titan's Bane potentially to help with securing some of these objectives, pending on how late this game goes.
Dr. L is barely going to avoid the pluck coming out of Jelly. He pulls Jelly back in, forcing out the lurking in the water yet again. However, a little bit of cooldown reduction here between that Spirit's Robe, so he's not going to be too worried here about using that ultimate just to get out.
Jelly is very tanky right now, which is what he needs to be considering how aggressively he has been dashing into these fights. Even though he's been having a lot of setup potential for his team, it still puts him in an unfavorable position majority of the time that he then has to kite himself away from.
He could be a little bit more tanky, honestly, if you look at it, because it's 38 minutes into the game. He still has Traveler Shoes. Plucked in is Jacob, stunned by Delta Marine, forced to kind of retreat, using his own heal and banking on the Sylvanas heals over time to kind of top him off. And Obey, they need to burst somebody down instantly. However, if they dump all their abilities onto one one target, there's going to be an instant turnaround by Elevate.
2 Pestilences, a Brawler's Beatstick, and a Divine Ruin for anti-heal on the side of Obey Alliance. So they're clearly concerned about what Visions is able to provide as far as sustain is concerned. As long as Obey watch their positioning, because that's probably the most crucial aspect right now for them, trying to avoid the damage coming out from Mr. Teep should any of them stack and build up those lightning charges.
Well, both these teams at the moment battling for positioning around this Fire Giant. Vision control would favor Obey Alliance with those 2 Sentry Wards above and underneath the right side mid Harpies, and that's some really crucial side control because you need to spot out any sort of potential flankers, specifically Dr. L.
But Dr. L is on the left-hand side of the map right now. Obey Alliance may or may not be aware of this right now. Jacob Taz getting stunned down by Mifflin in the 72 transformations, trying to make his way into the Fire Giant pit. Well, meanwhile, Jelly's on the back line, forcing out Griffin.
Taking a little bit of poke for his trouble. Rewind will get him back into the thick of things as Dworst. It's going to force out the beats from Mr. Teep. You could be easy knowing that he's going to communicate that to the rest of his team. Zaxi in the back line, taking a lot of damage from Dr. L. He's going to knock himself up. The shell from Jelly's good enough to buy his Hunter a little bit of time. Great kill from Delta Marine, but however, Jacob, on the backhand side, picking out Dworst a 1-for-1 at the end of the day.
Dr. L probably the better character to fall out of all the members on Elevate. Sure, he's dealing a decent bit of damage, but his primary purpose is to chase down Zaxi wherever he goes, and he was able to accomplish that feat, forcing out Delta Marine's final judgment just to ensure that Zaxi wouldn't die.
Neither team can realistically get this Fire Giant, it seems. It's just this constant tug of war. Who's going to get the better end of it? But as the game progresses, these respawn timers are going to be very long. Mifflin on the backhand side takes a lot of damage, barely survives the detonate, gets into the cloud, instantly disengages.
One of those clenching type moments for Mifflin for sure, but I'd have to agree with you. This really is a seemingly endless tug of war, and even though Obey Alliance has gotten this Portal Demon down to 50% health, Visions with the Blinken just to try and force everybody back.
He's already half health though, lurking in the water, will not secure the Portal Demon. Vision's taking a little bit of poke, but the rest of Obey Alliance will not follow their Sobek into action, allowing Elevate with another objective. Gold doesn't matter. Experience, it doesn't matter. What matters is this next team fight. If there's multiple deaths on either side, that's when things are going to start opening up.
With everybody being full build pretty much, aside from maybe some upgraded actives and purple pots and red pots, it's just so back and forth for these two teams. It seems as though Elevate is having a little bit better engage though, just because of Dr. L consistently forcing out Zaxi in that back line.
And Mr. Teep does a lot of damage here. Having that Shaman's Ring fully evolved makes it a nightmare for Obey Alliance to try to get in there. We saw that Mifflin barely survived with 1% health after that detonate. Fire Giant gonna get started up here by Elevate. The rest of Obey are thinking about finding a way. Mifflin's underneath. Topside is Jelly, plucking Jacob Task into the thick of things. Nice little knockup onto Visions as he tries to use that ultimate, plucking 2 back into the thick of things though, but Dr. L in the back takes out Delta Marine.
That was a massive knockup stun from Jacob Task, but now Mifflin making sure that it doesn't go unanswered, cleaning up Visions. Jelly still messing around in the back line, peeling for his carries by killing Dr. L.
Dr. L will take a spill. 2-for-1 for Obey. Looking for a pluck is Jelly. He has a speed buff. He honestly, I thought, missed that pluck on purpose, trying to get closer to Mr. Teep and maybe knocking him up for the rest of his teammates to follow suit. Dworst, though, has Blink. He knows Mr. Teep's... Oh, no, the beats are still up. I thought for a moment that Dworst used that ultimate to get the beats earlier on.
That fight was actually just saved so hard by Jacob Task, however, because he used his ultimate on Delta Marine as Delta Marine was charging while 3 members of Elevate were stacked on top of each other. If Delta Marine launches that final judgment, Obey Alliance wipes that fight.
20 seconds until Visions responds, 25 until Dr. L comes back into the battleground of the gods, and Obey with a 4-on-3 advantage, starting the Fire Giant. Jelly, though, half health, needs to be mindful about his positioning. Sprint does get popped. They want to find a kill onto Mr. Teep. Dworst goes in with his ultimate, but it was beads the way he knocked up into play. Zaxi trying to do what he can for the damage. Airstrike has forced him to disengage. Mr. Teep is kiting around, and he's gonna live. No, Mifflin, he's chasing him down under the tier 2 tower. He needs 1 cudgel, 1 master's will. It's not on the mark.
And in fact, it's actually going to be Griffin who ends up falling for Elevate, trying to help peel his Zeus out of there, but it worked out because Mr. Teep is still alive.
Oh my goodness, Mifflin says, don't worry guys, I got this. I'm gonna be the hero we all need. Dwarfs though gets canceled on his back. Jacob's has trying to press a little bit more forward. His Visions is right behind him. You gotta feel so bad for Mifflin in that situation.
But anytime you choose to take the engagement at 30% health, you just gotta anticipate the worst case scenario, especially when there's a T2 tower involved.
Sometimes, you know, you gotta risk it for the biscuit, and that's exactly what Mifflin was thinking right there. If he kills Mr. Teep, that's a huge damage spike that Elevate won't have now in this next engagement, but better safe than sorry sometimes, and now they're going to have to wait for Mifflin to respawn in 20 seconds. Luckily, though, they picked off Griffin to just kind of stall things down, and this has been the whole theme of this game. Anyone that dies, you can rest easy knowing there's going to be one more to follow from the other side.
But that was the beneficial factor for Elevate, is Mr. Teep surviving that, because that means that Obey Alliance can't aggress onto the Fire Giant. If Mr. Teep goes down, then that leaves all the opportunity in the world to secure that FG, because Delta Marine should have the secure over Griffin.
The AoE damage control from Elevate is just too much. You were talking about the early game going the way of Elevate, but we're way past the early game. We're heading into the 45th minute mark for Obey, and keep in mind, the Chronos, though, is still the late game that Elevate need with his passive, getting that extra power per minute played, fully stacked, I think at around 50 minutes or so, and this is getting really scary for Obey if they don't close this out.
Meanwhile, Mifflin and Dr. L doing what they've been doing all game, just attacking each other to no end.
No end whatsoever. Even a battle for any little control of vision around the Sentry Ward underneath the right side mid Harpies. Obey controlling the space around the Fire Giant. Elevate trying to push forward. How do you expect any sort of penetration between these two teams?
Between these two teams, it's really all just going to come down to who has the better team fight in general. If an ult is off the mark right now, it's not the time that either side can really afford that to happen.
Jacob trying to lead the charge for his team. Obey not pulling the trigger on the Fire Giant quite yet. Doris is forced to jump away, not on the mark with Visions because of the little nice counter juke coming out of Doris, still zoning the rest of Elevate while Obey is trying to get up that portal demon. Dr. L taking a lot of damage, but not until Mifflin goes into the ultimate trying to avoid the damage from Griffin.
But with Griffin having rotated to that mid lane section alongside of Dr. L, this was a 3v4 that Obey could have potentially put a little bit more pressure onto the portal demon. That does seem to be their mentality. They're looking to commit to this.
Portal demon will be secured this time by Obey Alliance, and this is really good because they are a little low here, but Visions doesn't care. Great stun onto 3 dwarfs, takes a lot of damage. Final Judgment being channeled. It's not really on the mark and connecting onto anybody's. Dwarfs has to disengage on the north. Jacob disengages on the south. Griffin is not going to get connected on that pluck, but instead he's going to rewind. He wants to go back in. Dr. L finding dwarfs as the first victim.
And Jelly trying to get away back into his T2 tower now. Meanwhile, Zaxi, it could be in some danger. Same could be set for Mifflin, as it's the entirety of Elevate looking to chase him down. 72 transformations getting him out for now.
He doesn't have the ultimate, so he's going to have to retreat under his own tier 2 tower. The Portal Demon was secured by Obey Alliance, but Elevate, they don't care. They find the kill. They get the tier 2 tower in the mid lane. Delta Marine dash, and I'm not sure if Elevate heard or saw that position. That could have been an easy collapse. Mifflin, though, gonna stop the back from Griffin. Kind of lazy back and caught between a rock and a hard place. Plugged back in, taken out.
That's one of those moments where you just forget that the portal exists, and Griffin, thinking that the team fight had already fallen apart and everybody was ready to just back off, looking for the lazy back. Unfortunately, Obey was ready to scoop him up.
Remember how I said whenever there's one kill, there's going to be another one very quickly to follow up? Well, it wasn't as quick as the other ones, but Griffin did take a spill. Jacob, though, in a little bit of trouble, gets peeled by Visions with a nice double knock on Mifflin, forced to go into the sky, but Dr. L takes out Zaxi before the airstrike.
Dr. L actually ensuring that Jacob, Task, and Visions don't end up dying to Zaxi right then and there, and instead, Obey Alliance once again having to fall back from what looked like could have been a very favorable situation.
No Hunter for Elevate for 30 seconds, no Hunter for Obey for another minute. The disparity between these two teams are just so evenly matched, it seems. 23-20, almost 50 minutes into the game. Obey Alliance, the former world defending champions, taking on kind of a new group of players from Elevate.
And this is one of those moments, though, where I would like to see a little bit of a switch up as far as itemization is concerned for Zachsy. Just hold that thought, though. It's going to be Mifflin trying to get away right now. Same for Jelly. Dr. L looking for the pull back in to the rest of Elevate, but Jelly's already pretty deep into his own jungle. Delta Marino over trying to help peel for his support as Jelly gets knocked up.
The Final Judgment not doing enough damage as Mr. T confirms the kill onto Jelly. It's not that much trouble, though, for Obey Alliance because Dr. L is forced to retreat, so as long as they keep pushing forward, not allowing Visions to heal up, they could find a return kill. That's exactly what Doors is thinking about doing. He has the blink, he has the ultimate. They're trying to find him into combat. They didn't push him down. Visions is very low thus far. He's not on the mark with the pull, rooting Mr. Teep into place. Mifflin's gonna go into the cloud, creating a distraction because Delta Marine is right around the corner.
But Mifflin got exactly what he wanted, and that was for Elevate to back off of the Fire Giant. They've been down 40%. Mr. Teep, though, huge damage onto Delta Marine.
Great play. The stun from Griffin connects onto Delta Marine, and Dr. L was there to clean up. No life for Delta Marine. Jelly still dead for 25 seconds. It's finally a 5-on-3 for Elevate. They're going to go for this Fire Giant. It's sitting at half health. Dwars is right behind there. They don't really spot him out, though.
Dwars wants to just try and cause as much chaos as possible.
Just
Dr. L taking so much damage.
They got it! They
Giant.
stole the Fire Giant. Obey Alliance yet again. They stole the gold Fury earlier, and now with the Fire Giant, there's just no counting out these world-defending champions.
After all that effort from Elevate to finally find 2 picks onto Obey, and yet they still ended up losing the big objective, the Fire Daddy.
It's just, Obey Alliance to me in this game, they're like a cockroach that like you kill one, here comes a couple more after the fact. You can just never kill all of them, and they are here to play. The first Fire Giant, 50 minutes into the game, goes away off of a steal.
That's exactly what Obey were just trying to do that entire time, however. Elevate was so focused and so hesitant. I think the hesitance from Elevate is ultimately what led to their demise there. There were multiple situations where they could have potentially looked for that Fire Giant and looked to just have that all-in commit. When Delta Marine's Final Judgment was on cooldown, even before they killed him, they probably could have afforded to just secure that Fire Giant. It's okay to 50-50 an objective sometimes when you have that kind of advantage, especially since Mr. Teep should technically secure that.
And it was just worst, honestly. Coming from the backside, wrapping around underneath, they didn't really spot out the Xing Chen because they were worried about the other side above them, and that allowed Dwars just to get there in the nick of time for the steal. The rest of his team now with 3 members of Fire Giant, and more importantly, this one member here, Zachsy, this hunter with Fire Giant, this level 20 Jingwei. Actually, I just saw a glimpse of it. He bought a 3k protection potion and just used it.
Understandably so, with the way that Dr. L has been chasing him down the entire game. Being poked out so frequently by Susano just makes you paranoid, and Elevate has such a tank-heavy roster. Speaking of which, Mifflin's health just got halfway pushed out, and his ultimate being down is going to make these tower sieges all the more difficult for Obey to accomplish.
It's going to be on cooldown for probably about 80 seconds or so with that 10% cooldown reduction coming from that Spirit's Robe. He's not too worried because on the left-hand side, Tier 2 was taken out by Obey Alliance. Dwars trying to zone out Dr. L for the time being. The rest of Obey going to back off because Mifflin is getting the Tier 2 in the mid.
But trying to siege these Phoenixes and these T2 towers is still proving to be a pretty difficult task for Obey. Elevate choosing to back off of their mid T2, probably going to forfeit their right T2 as well, should Obey look to go on it. But the real thing here is that even though they secured the Fire Giant, it was a 50-minute Fire Giant, which means that Elevate still has just as much opportunity to fight into this as before.
Left-hand side, yet again, a 4-on-4 on the left as Obey Alliance are putting Mifflin in the mid just to keep Dr. L at bay. This is going to favor Zachsy and Delta Marine not have to worry about that backline penetration damage coming from the Susano, and with this 2-man fork coming from Obey, Elevate are being spread thin.
But Elevate aren't done just quite yet as Griffin looking to put a little bit of damage out onto Obey. Everybody just having a pretty difficult time.
Mifflin did a lot of damage to that mid Phoenix. We could easily see a little swap from Obey Alliance just to all in and try to look for an engagement on that side. And that's kind of what appears to be the case, as Delta Marine and Zaxi are turning their sights over there. Dwurst is thinking about collapsing underneath. He's looking for the knockup, but Visions engages first. However, Zaxi is going to dash away Typhoon, not really on the mark onto anyone. Visions, though, gets pulled back into a little bit of danger. Jelly is looking for the plug here. He's thinking about who he's going to get. He finds Mr. Teep. The stun is good. The damage is so much. Egg is going to buy him some time for the moment. Mr. Teep still being focused by Dwurst, still taking a lot of damage. The airstrike from Zaxi was considering diving that. In the meantime, though, a lot of members from Obey Alliance took a lot of damage, finally securing that middle Phoenix. Griffin going to survive with that rewind. Obey are running away with a middle Phoenix.
And they might as well, considering that the Fire Giant has actually just ran out for them. So better off being safe and playing safe. They managed to find a Phoenix, and that is the real victory. Even though they weren't able to secure that kill onto Mr. Teep, at the very least, they still forced out his actives, and actually pretty much every single relic was used there by the members of Elevate. Only an Aegis left standing for Griffin.
Portal Demon secured by Obey Alliance. They're setting themselves up for the next Fire Giant to respawn. The portal lasts for 60 seconds. Fire Giant respawning in 20. No one dead here on the side of Elevate, but having to deal with some fire minion waves in the mid lane might make things a little easier for Obey Alliance, as long as they push that lane down a little bit more, trying to get that wave closer and closer to the Titan room out of Elevate.
Obey just has to keep that lane push if they want to have the same success in securing the remaining Phoenixes from Elevate, because otherwise Elevate has a very strong defense, as Jelly is choosing to go in right now on Divisions, kind of just a sitting duck, expending his ultimate, but it only connects with Jelly.
Delta Marine, though, on the backside takes a lot of poke from Jacob and Dr. L. He's trying to stun out to one, still getting chased by the Chug. Mifflin doesn't care because he's zoning out 3 on the bottom side. Finally, the rest of Obey Alliance are going to save their mid laner and keep the Thoth alive.
And Mifflin still trying to handle 4 members now of Elevate. Just going to fall back to where his team is actually at. And Dwurst and Jacob Tass, just the lone stare down.
Jacob trying to do what he can to make sure that Obey Alliance don't secure this next important Fire Giant, gets knocked up into place. We're seeing a little bit of poke from Mr. T, but it's just really not enough. The rest of Obey are still focused on Jacob. They get him to half health, forcing out that Torment already. The ultimate as well from Mr. T to follow up. Mifflin takes a lot of damage. No ultimate to escape into the clouds for him. He's going to take a spill. The rewind is good from Griffin. The rest of Elevate with a 5-on-4 advantage for a long time. Dashing away is Delta Marine. Did a lot of damage to Griffin, forcing out the Purification beats, and the Jaeger's Jelly saves his backline a little bit more. As Dr. L, he's not done yet. He wants to continue chasing this down a little bit further, but the rest of Elevate conforming towards this Fire Giant.
That Gem of Isolation putting in work right now from Mr. Teep, slowing pretty efficiently as Obey Alliance is trying to maneuver around this backside. Fire Giant already at 30% health. It seems as though Elevate could potentially commit here. Instead, Vision's going to ult up Dwurst.
Dwurst got knocked up. Final Judgment was not on the mark to Mr. Teep, just barely out of range. The knockup will hit Visions up there. Dwurst is still very low on the left-hand side. Fire Giant still very low. Will be secured here by Elevate, their first one of the game. Mid Phoenix still due to respawn in about a minute.
And Griffin is going to be the one with the task of the responsibility of clearing out these fire waves. For Obey, that was just not being able to find an opening, really well executed by Elevate as far as the zoning was concerned. And for me, it's just Delta Marine's Final Judgment not being able to connect with anybody from Elevate.
Just slightly out of range. Mr. Teep could feel the wind from that ultimate at the tail end. So thanking his lucky stars that he lives to fight another day. Also, switching up his build is Mr. Teep. He sold the Shaman's Ring just to go for that Gem of Isolation. A little bit of self-peel or more on the aggressive side, Taco?
A little bit of both, to be honest. With the Gem of Isolation, he can have some of that self-peel due to how heavily Obey has been trying to commit to him. But on top of that, it also works offensively because that additional slow is just going to be brutal for Obey, who's been trying to rely on their mobility as far as finding the kills.
It seems that Elevate are more worried about keeping the teamfights last as long as possible. They don't need Mr. Teep to have this heavy burst damage as long as they have the heals kills coming out of Visions. There are a lot of protections with the Lotus Crown and making it very difficult to really kill any of these hyper carries. Warlock Sash for Griffin, also going for the Hide of Urchin for Mr. Teep. These two hyper carries is difficult for Obey to lock down.
I wouldn't mind seeing Griffin potentially sell that Bancross for a Polynomicon just because of the way that it would act with that fourth quadrant, particularly that basic attack damage at a 58-minute game, and Chronos' passive stacking up is absolutely insane right now.
Wouldn't be a bad idea for Griffin playing the Chronos, but the rest of Elevate now, they have Fire Giant for another 2 minutes. They're going to do the same exact thing that Obey was doing to them by having a 4-on-4 on the left and a 1v1 in the mid. Dr. L trying to find the right angle to go in. Visions finding the knockup onto Delta Marine as Duers creating a little bit of havoc himself in the back line. Visions trying to find more people to root or pull as the left side Phoenix still being aggressed on. Diving in the back is Jacob, as well as Duers and Mifflin on the backhand side. No one dying quite yet. Zeus Ultimate being used. Final Judgment not on the mark. Knocked up is Jacob, barely surviving for the moment. Left side Phoenix still standing strong.
Everybody is so low though from Elevate as Obey Alliance is trying to move around. Dr. L getting locked into place thanks to Duers, and now Jelly's going to be able to clean him up. Meanwhile, Vision's just trying to drop the heals where he can, but he'll get stunned.
The stun is good from Delta, dashing in, barely surviving the timer from Griffin. He needs to peel back. Zaxi is going to follow up from the nice knock-up root combination. 2 crits, 519. Zaxi taking out the fourth member out of Elevate. Only standing is Jacob, but not for long. It's going to be a deicide. Look at those respawn timers. 60 minutes into the game, and Obey Alliance are surely going to win this one.
This is an easy end for Obey Alliance now. What seemed like a very promising Phoenix Siege and Titan Siege, Elevate's dreams were absolutely crushed after that team fight, and that's just kind of the risk you take. Even when you get a Fire Giant this late into the game, you're against a late game composition nonetheless, and it will be a surrender, not even waiting to watch as their Titan will fall.
Elevate are ready to get into the next game, and both of these two teams are just so tired, I would have to say, probably after that. It takes a lot out of you to play a 60-minute game.
It's a very taxing mindset to have to go into, especially for the losing side. I'm more curious for how Elevate is going to respond to this after such a brutal comeback from Obey.
Well, Obey's Mifflin was doing a lot of work in a lot of these team fights, you know, diving into the backline whenever he could. He was a reason, basically, that middle Phoenix was initially engaged on once there was that 4-1 split, just using that Ox form really well, being that bait, going from this physical warrior early game that does a lot of damage just to being a meat shield in the late.
Mifflin and Duers, to me, were really some standout members for Obey in this game. Even though they weren't necessarily getting all the glory of securing the kills, they were still providing such a strong frontlining factor that it made everything possible for Obey. Even that last team fight in particular, Mifflin and Duers were right in the thick of things, and had it not been for them, I really do feel as though Elevate would have easily just wiped out Obey.
And how do you think things would differ a little bit if there was more frontline protection coming for Delta Marine?
For Delta Marine, it's just that I think he kind of understood that he was just going to be completely abused the entire time. After that rough start to the match where it was just nonstop Dr. L and Mr. Teep, even Visions completely tearing him apart, not a whole lot of room left for him to work with. And so because of that, Duers just had to understand my mid laner is going to be aggressed on nonstop. Let me peel for him where I can, and I know that he's mechanically strong enough to come back from it.
If there's one play I'm looking at in particular that kind of saved Obey's behind was honestly Duers wrapping around underneath for that Fire Giant. But after that 60-minute game, the players are going to take a little bit of a break, and we'll be back shortly for game number 2.